after everything I'm about to tell you. I want you to comment and let me know if your shopping habits change. Recently, I posted a video surrounding issues with Chiquita bananas, and I was blown away by the response. You didn't know that the company is tied to violence, bloodshed, murder, massacre, drug smuggling, gun smuggling, and more. So many of you in my comments were calling to boycott Chiquita, and everybody else was saying that I was pronouncing it incorrectly. In this video, I'm going to break down all of Chiquita's violent and unethical business practices. Have you ever read 100 Years of Solitude? You'll notice that in chapters 14 and 15, it actually talks about the Banana Massacre that happened in Colombia. Around 25,000 workers for the United Fruit Company at the time, modern-day Chiquita, went to strike. They were striking for fair pay with real money, because they were being paid with these company vouchers that they could only spend at company stores. They were also demanding a 6-day work week instead of a 7-day work week, and for just better working conditions overall. The strike lasted for weeks, which was long enough for the United Fruit Company to feel it, because you've got up to 25,000 of your workers not coming in anymore. Your workers are not working them bananas anymore, so you're not able to sell. So they rolled up their sleeves and got the Colombian government involved, who got the military involved. And it's here that the story gets ugly. The Chiquita workers gathered in a square in hopes of a peaceful resolution. The military surrounded them. They were told to spare no lives instead of engaging in negotiations. To be able to call in the military like that, the United Fruit Company first addressed this issue with the Colombian government. Now, the Colombian government at the time didn't want any issues with an American company. They declared that these gatherings were illegal, and so they gave the orders to the military to open fire. In a matter of minutes, it's gone from the workers hoping for peaceful negotiations to being surrounded and shot at in the crowd. And bear in mind, these people were unarmed and they had their families with them. So it's estimated that up to 3,000 people were killed in this massacre. After the massacre, the Colombian government justified their actions, claiming that the workers were communists. That type of work is like bums on seats, basically. It doesn't matter who does it. So it was very easy to get a new batch of workers through. The United Fruit Company went to work as usual. In the book 100 Years of Solitude, it's actually written that the number of casualties reported was actually very much downplayed by officials. If you're wondering how the United Fruit Company assisted with the CIA in overthrowing the Guatemalan government, killing around 200,000 people so they could keep owning the majority of Guatemala's land, ports, telephone system, and of course, sell bananas, then just turn your attention to the director of the CIA, Alan, and his brother John. John and his New York law firm Sullivan and Cromwell represented the United Fruit Company. And John also had served on the United Fruit Company's board of trustees and owned shares in the company. Now, the guy responsible for all of the propaganda campaigns is Ed Whitman, the United Fruit Company's top public relations officer. He's the husband of Ann Whitman, the US president at the time's President Eisenhower's private secretary. Ed Whitman went as far as to produce a film called Why the Kremlin Hates Bananas, which was set in the Cold War, and the United Fruit Company were the heroes fighting on the front line. The mission of the United Fruit Company, backed by the CIA to overthrow the Guatemalan government and regain control, was called Operation PB Success. They wrote out the official plan months before the execution of the coup. The United Nations called this a genocide to the Mayan population because around 170,000 Mayans were wiped out. President at the time, it was President Arbenz. He was a reformist, so he wanted to give the land back to the people, local farmers, so they would stop suffering in poverty. United Fruit Company obviously wasn't having it. I mean, how can you take my land that I'm growing bananas on to dish out to your local people? That means that we can't cultivate the bananas to sell to our people back in America. So the United Fruit Company immediately began this propaganda campaign. They called this mass propaganda, with the general characteristics that mass propaganda plays on the subconscious. Mass propaganda speaks in a variety of manners. Mass propaganda must be closely geared to the moment, to the moods, habits, topics of public interest. They hired an advertising agency. Their main goal was to convince the US that President Arbenz was a communist. We're at the height of the Cold War at the moment, so being a communist is the worst thing you can be. So they put that in there and it worked. This reached the mainstream. There was an article in the Times that described Guatemala operating under severe communist-inspired pressure. So the CIA's plans finally came to fruition, and they launched their military coup to overthrow the democratically elected President Arbenz, put in a military dictator who they'd already profiled. The new president, Carlos Almas, gave back all of the United Fruit Company's confiscated land. They gave them preferential treatment at the ports, at the railways, and the United Fruit Company continued as usual.
A stunning verdict in a South Florida federal court.
Hi, Chiquita Banana.
Chiquita, the banana giant, found liable by a U.S. jury for funding a so-called Colombian death squad.
In the late 1990s, Colombia was in conflict. There were massacres, forced disappearances. It was given the Colombia the media romanticized in their movies, the dangerous Colombia from back in the day. So during these violent times, Chiquita found itself in volatile territory. Their workers were in danger, their work environment and their properties were in danger. So Chiquita decided to pay a paramilitary organization for protection and security. They actually ended up paying two separate organizations, the FARC and the AUC. Chiquita admitted this. They admitted that between 1997 and 2004, they made at least 100 payments to the AUC, totaling 1.7 million US dollars. That's just to one of these terrorist organizations. They were fined for this and had to pay a hefty fine.
Chiquita says it made the payments to protect its employees, but victims successfully argued that executives were aware that the resources were being used to kill civilians and suppress unions near their operations in Colombia.
The true damages of Chiquita funding these terrorist organizations kind of caught up with them this year, where 8 families whose relatives were murdered by this terrorist organization took Chiquita to court in a civil lawsuit for involvement in the wrongful deaths of their family members.
They took my son, and I know he will not come back to me, but this decision offers some relief.
Chiquita had to pay out 38 million US dollars in damages. This is great news for these families, but can you even start to imagine how many other acts of violence Chiquita had a role in? Not just in Colombia, this is a banana republic. At this point, you already know that Chiquita funds terrorist organizations like the AUC and also the FARC. So it comes as no surprise that they would smuggle guns, ammunition through Chiquita's banana transportations. When one of these shipments were found in Belgium and the UK, they found up to $33 million worth of cocaine on board. There are voicemails that have been leaked of Chiquita executives talking about this very problem because it was frequent. There was an instance where Chiquita facilitated the diversion of around 3,000 AK-47 rifles and over 5 million rounds of ammunition on a boat going from Panama to Antioquia. They put on the paperwork that the container contained plastic and rubber balls. When you eat a banana produced in a monoculture system where tropical plants are grown extremely close to each other, they share the same genetic lineage. They lack nutrients because of poor soil quality, and that's because of the high use of pesticides, and they're extremely highly susceptible to disease. What exactly are you eating? A banana named after William Cavendish, the 6th Duke of Devonshire. On average, we eat about 100 bananas a year. The majority of these bananas for commercial consumption are Cavendish bananas because they're produced in a monoculture. Even though they don't taste the best, they're not the most sustainable, they're the most popular. To keep up with this massive supply, Chiquita heavily relies on a variety of pesticides to keep their crops from fungi, from insects, from disease. Because of this monoculture, bananas from Guatemala share the exact same genetic makeup to Ecuador. If pests, fungi, or a disease breaks out with one, Because everything else is exactly the same, you eventually end up wiping out the whole crop, the whole farm. It's happened before. So there's a dire need for pesticides, but the more pesticides you use, the less effective they become, because nature simply adapts. Chiquita just announced the development of a new banana variety called Yellowway. Cavendish banana is not invincible. They're tinkering around to make this banana as disease resistant as possible. I've said a lot about Chiquita. There are two main reasons why people would choose to boycott Chiquita. The first reason is because of their unethical and violent business practices. The second reason is because you don't support monoculture farming. When I posted the video about why I would never consume a Chiquita banana, the biggest question I got was, what are the alternatives? And the great news is we have other options. We made a directory of every single banana producer that cultivate and sell bananas in Europe, North America, and everywhere else. We don't need to source a subpar banana all the way from Latin America. We don't need to do it. I understand the convenience. Chiquita has quite literally taken over the banana industry. They're everywhere, so it seems like they're the only choice when you go to the store. I've been lucky enough to taste nearly every single banana known to humankind. I farmed bananas, I've harvested bananas while living on the land. Additionally, I've done deep dive investigations into the very same banana plantations that supply the world's biggest stores. I've seen it with my own eyes and been kicked out of these plantations because I've also seen a lot of foul play. My personal experiences have given me insight into why I choose not to eat any Chiquita bananas. But what about you? After everything I'm about to tell you about Chiquita, I want you to comment and let me know if your shopping habits change.